Second biggest opening weekend in American cinema history. What's up, everyone? We are all very excited to be talking about Spider-Man No Way Home tonight. I'm going in at about as high a speed as the movie did with its opening scene. It's it's a fantastic entry into the MCU, at least in my opinion. Obviously, we're going to hear what the rest of the panel thinks. We're all back together after last week's episode, coming at you a little early in the week this time. So, guys, let's dive right into Spider-Man No Way Home.
And of course, spoiler alerts are in full effect. We will be spoiling this movie. So if you've not seen this, if you've not seen No Way Home, please go away until you've seen it. But we love you anyways.
And then please come back and watch every video on the channel.
Like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.
Down below.
Hey, wait.
All
so
right.
I gotta ask, since I hadn't heard. I heard it had a massive opening. I hadn't heard it was that massive. What's it second only to?
Second only to Avengers Endgame, which was
Still,
1.2 billion domestically over its opening weekend. Or I'm sorry, 1.2 billion worldwide over its opening weekend.
Oh, goodness, George.
Yeah, that's on my bad, guys. But domestically, No Way Home is at about 270 million, 260 million, somewhere in there, for its opening weekend, which beat Infinity War by only a few million for an opening weekend, which, you know, it's that big of an event in the MCU. So let's start off the movie here. We're gonna run right down the plot, talk about the big moments, what we liked, what we didn't like. Probably going to be a lot more of what we liked. So the movie starts right where Far From Home left off. Mysterio reveals Peter Parker's identity. And then you get into this high stakes, I'm going to swing home with MJ. Just get out of the public eye for a little while.
Well, it picked up with the same energy that Far From Home ended with, right? You know, he was frantically swinging through the skyline of New York City, going on a date with MJ, and it had the same kind of filming feel to it, but obviously very different context. And I thought that was pretty interesting. You know, it was nice to see J. Jonah Jameson make his reappearance again into the MCU after playing the same role, different, obviously, version of J. Jonah Jameson in the early 2000s version of Spider-Man.
I feel like two main things stood out to me in the opening scene, just the opening thing. The first one is I enjoyed the subversion of the classic Spider-Man trope of like taking his girlfriend web swinging, and that's like in almost every other movie, it's just like, it's, you know, just like, whoa, exciting, you know, but here, MJ is like completely terrified and like, oh my God, this is horrible. And she has to do it, but it's like, it's like utterly terrifying to do because she's not at all used to it. And so I felt it showed how they were thinking about what they do and like being a bit clever. And two, I really, really appreciated how I feel like unlike Far From Home, and to its detriment, I feel like this one actually does pick up right from Far From Home and genuinely does continue the story. And that was something I was very happy to see. Far From Home, as much as I liked it, I completely understand why, you know, the 5-year gap and all that. It was still just a bit disappointing how it felt like they just completely, like, you know, like they didn't address Aunt May learning that he's Spider-Man. That was disappointing for me in Far From Home. So here, No Way Home, it's half the movie is about his identity being revealed. You know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess for the most part, it was like pretty much like you guys said, right? The same sort of theme of what was happening in Far From Home at the end, where yeah, it's like he's swinging MJ around for a date, and then she doesn't want to do it again, and then his identity gets revealed, and then she has to do it again. I thought it was a good opening. I don't know. I don't have too much to say about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was the way that Homecoming begins, obviously, is back after the Battle of New York with Adrian Toomes and, cleaning up the scraps of the battle. It's more of a flashback to introduce us to that character. Far From Home is more about the legacy of Tony Stark, and they're going on this trip to Europe. Actually, the film begins with Nick Fury and Maria Hill in Mexico meeting Mysterio for the first time. But then when we first see Peter Parker, he's planning this trip to Europe. The energy level of this opening is just outstanding. And I think the biggest part of that, and Max and I were talking about this before the two of you joined the call, before we started the recording, is the Talking Heads song Izimbra is playing underneath that whole opening sequence. And that's a very, it's a very driving rhythm. It's got different elements of music layered on top of each other. And so that adds to the anxiety, I guess, for the audience. But then also, once Peter and MJ arrive at Peter and May's apartment, they go to a single shot shaky cam for a couple of minutes just to elevate that tension. And I think the combination of the musical backing and the camera work, in addition to obviously his identity just got revealed after he's been keeping it secret for all this time, it just played up the chaos of what's happening to Peter Parker's life and all the people who know him. And that it was just, from a filmmaking perspective, fantastic. So
Totally did a good job with it. John Watts clearly had a lot of I
John
won't say
Watts.
clearly, but John Watts did a great job here. There was a lot of really interesting and fantastical stuff that he had a lot to do, and he did it damn well in this one.
Yeah. So next up was the Department of Damage Control raid at their apartment, and they go to talk to federal agents, of course, after the legal troubles. And we blocked out 10 minutes here for Declan to talk about how much he loves Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, which was a cameo that I think
wasn't enough.
A lot of people were talking about whether or not Charlie Cox would make an appearance as Matt Murdock. Obviously, he was the star of his own Netflix series. Now, Kevin Feige has confirmed that he's going to be the MCU's Daredevil. We'll probably see him in a future Disney Plus series, maybe a movie. A little more than I don't know. I would say it's about a cameo.
Yeah,
level
it's a
appearance.
single scene, which I mean, it was obviously a big disappointment that the title of the film didn't actually end up being called Daredevil and Spider-Man No Way Home. That was obviously a big. I was like, what? No, Daredevil needs to be a second character. Every scene needs to have people be like, hey, where's Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil? No, sorry, I'll hold off from the talking about Daredevil, but no, in all honesty, his single scene was great, and it was awesome, to see him again. I think there might have been a bit. It was the right call in the sense of we didn't want to get bogged down in the subplot, but it was sort of interesting how it's like, yeah, I'm Matt Murdock, and I just solved all your legal troubles, and you're now free.
Except Happy's.
No, not except Happy's for sure. And all that. But it is sort of like, oh, so there is no trial, I wish they could have at least explained how Matt Murdock is there's clearly this evidence that shows that Mysterio actually was the guy in control.
Do you want the legal explanation?
I think not like a
Spider-Man No
full-on
Way Home, the legal drama.
But just something more than just I'm a really good lawyer. Don't get me wrong, it was really funny and I enjoyed it. I'm just saying, in a perfect world, it would have been nice if they somehow could have given.
You said that there was nothing concrete that they could bring to Peter Parker, which is pretty much about as good as you need, right? Like, I'm not sure how much more.
I would say I feel like there was absolutely zero, and I would just like one thing, just to explain how all the legal troubles are gone. That's what I.
That is the most peculiar critique of a movie.
I would say it shows
more courtroom.
It is a major component of the opening plot that's then entirely dropped. Again, I get it. Don't get me wrong. They need to focus on just the social impact on Peter Parker,
I think
not its like legal impact. I'm just saying, I think
impact is like completely, it really doesn't matter.
Well, that's something.
The multiverse is, more at stake. Like legal issues.
It also might not be over, right?
I completely understand that. I guess what I'm saying is Matt Murdock functions basically as a Deus Ex Machina here. It's like I get it. I understand why. I'm just saying it could have been a little bit better by just having a bit more explanation.
Well, I mean, I think that's the point, though, right? Is that maybe it's not over, and that explanation might not hold up. But even if it does, Marvel is hoping that that's enough to tide us over until the next film, the next TV series, or whatever that we see Spider-Man in. Because, think of where the movie went after the first 10 minutes in the film, and think of how much it branched off, no pun intended.
Pun heavily intended.
Fine, I'll take credit for it. Pun heavily intended. Into, all of these different storylines that kind of have to be tied up. And having his legal trouble sort of show up would kind of be like him going back to high school for some reason to go to classes or something sometime later in the movie. Like, there's no reason for that.
The movie's pretty long as is, so I think
one thing
for sure.
that
Again, that's why I get it. I'm just saying I feel like it's lost.
Well, Matt Murdock says in his one scene, like, your legal troubles may be over, but there's still the court of public opinion, and that sort of moves the story on from where you talk about Mysterio and everything that's happened to where you go from here, and then we see Peter go back to high school, his first day of senior year. Betty Brant introduces it for the Midtown High news in her only scene in the movie, which I was a little confused by. She was a pretty big player in Far From Home. But he's back at school. There's the new display presented to him by Hannibal Buress, JB Smoove, and Martin Starr, all playing themselves, not their teacher characters.
Hannibal Buress is in real life a believer that Mysterio was a good guy, actually.
Yeah. Martin Starr had a great line at the end of that scene where he's like, he's a conspiracy theorist. So this is the only real part of the movie that went back to a little bit of where Homecoming and Far From Home slowed down for me, which was this is an awkward teen high school movie. And they're like applying to college and hanging out at a cafe. And I feel like the main reason why I want to watch Spider-Man movies is for the action and for the humor and the villains, obviously, which we'll get to. But I think this movie did itself a service, and huge props to John Watts and Kevin Feige, Amy Pascal, everyone involved in the creative process, just talking about how they wanted to put Peter in this high stakes situation and not focus on that he's just a kid anymore. So I really enjoyed that was, you still see how his high school is treating him. Obviously you get some funny moments with Flash, talking about how he's Spider-Man's best friend. But then you get into the actual meat and potatoes of the film where they don't get into MIT, and Peter wants help from the non-Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange. Yeah. What do you guys think of Wong being the Sorcerer Supreme?
It's awesome.
It makes a lot of sense
So
once he says why.
On a technicality.
Like, yeah. It was humorous. I wonder if there's going to be some sort of explanation for that Siberian snowstorm that occurs in like some TV show or something like that. Like there's going to be an episode of some show and like they'll like briefly like the characters in it briefly stop into the headquarters and then like I wonder if something like that will happen.
It's been a few weeks, but we haven't talked about Declan's love of exposition in a while.
Oh
Yeah.
no, I'm talking about a crossover. I'm like,
There was an explanation in the movie.
yeah, I know exactly. I'm saying it's like a comic crossover where it's like, oh hey, look, like there's a reference to something else that's happening in New York City. Like I'm saying, it would be enjoyable.
I will say this movie is chock full of references, memes, callbacks.
Oh my god.
I think this is the max you can go and still, retain like, the themes of the movies, and it worked because all the callbacks worked.
Yeah.
I'm
talking about in a future show. I'm not saying like it should happen. I'm saying in a future show. So I don't get why you guys are
MCU deck.
It's like this is like a very like, oh hey, I wonder if that will happen.
I don't think that's on Kevin Feige's.
Isn't this some sort of like call for an explanation as to why there's a snowstorm? I'm just curious, okay?
Sure.
Like maybe something to do with the Eternal. I don't even know. I'm just saying it would be.
But it was
That would
because
be
of
cool.
it was the panels in Doctor Strange where he like can change the climate. They came through because no one
Yeah.
closed it.
They said it was in Siberia, so I assume the blizzard was like, it wasn't like a random blizzard, it was just blizzards happening in Siberia.
Okay. I guess I missed that it was related to the thing.
It was a blizzard caused by Cersei turning Tiamat into an ice monster,
There we
ice
go.
celestial.
There we
There you go.
Sorry, spoiler for Eternals if you haven't seen it yet.
If you're watching this,
Yeah.
it's Eternals, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Let's be
Declan's right. So he goes to see Doctor Strange. Wong doesn't say his big line from the trailer,
Yeah.
which was, "Don't cast that spell." He just says, "Leave me out of it."
And he doesn't do the I
Bless
won't.
you.
Turns out this Doctor Strange is actually Doctor Strange and not Mephisto, as that fan theory went.
Okay. Confession time, and I texted. I forget which one of you I texted this, but
It was me.
I bought in to the Strange's Mephisto theory, and
I
so
thought-
I spent my entire first viewing thinking that would be revealed.
Can I be real? There was
Please.
there was a moment. We're jumping a little bit ahead, but it's fine. There was a moment where I felt like when Happy's apartment is being attacked and Aunt May runs in to grab a few items from the other room with like where the arc reactor was. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There was like a split second there, and eventually, obviously, it turned out to not at all be the case, where I was like, is she being controlled by an outside force, or is that not actually on Aunt May? Like, I was thinking of that exact fan.
It's being controlled by an outside force, and that outside force is morals.
Exactly. Yeah, turns
There
out
you
Aunt
go.
May-
We'll talk more about that when we get into the now famous apartment scene.
Yeah.
But so then Peter and Strange go down into the, as MJ later calls it, Wizard's Dungeon. Bless you, Ben.
Thank you.
They go into the Wizard's Dungeon, and Strange starts to cast the spell. Peter messes it up. 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 Only 5 times he makes that very clear to Doctor Strange.
Not 6.
Not
Just 5.
5 times.
Just 5.
And one thing that I noticed was different from the trailer was the spell was left uncontained in the trailer. And in the film, Strange boxes it up.
Hmm.
Yes.
It almost felt
Well,
like
he contains it, and then later he
What If.
boxes it up.
Yeah. It's definitely not. Well, maybe it is, but I doubt it. But it felt like it's like, did they get that like image from What If? Kind of like it terms
Well, they
of like the
they certainly got
universe.
something from What If, because the little pill bottle thing that Strange puts the spell
Mhm.
in, exactly like the pocket dimension in What
Yeah.
If, and
Huh.
the spell is bouncing around, and I think he's contained the reality in which the spell goes wrong.
Mm.
There's also a callback to that at the end where Doctor Strange is like keeping the reality like together,
Yeah.
like cracks and everywhere.
Very
He
true.
does the
Yeah.
same thing where he's trying to like keep it all together. I guess he's like trying to prevent the collapse in the other one, but it's the same idea.
Mm.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk more about the what if connections. I think at the end of this episode, we'll
Mm.
there's definitely something at the end of the movie, very end of the movie that we want to talk about. So Peter gets kicked out of the sanctum. That's not when the multiverse breaks, or so we think. So he goes to the bridge. He talks to the MIT admissions lady, or not admissions, vice chancellor.
Yeah. By the
Um,
way, can I just very quickly say can anyone else remember? I genuinely thought Flash Thompson was stupid, or not particularly great. Was he actually sort of smart in there? I mean, it's like
Well,
you
in the
just-
MCU, they all go to a science school, so
Yeah.
they've
Okay,
got to be
okay, yeah.
somewhat intelligent.
No
Yeah.
sleep till
Most
Boston.
like
Yeah.
Spider-Man comics, he's pretty dumb. He's like a jock.
yeah, exactly. Like it's like if they were getting into like an
But I mean,
Ivy League school or something, I feel like it's slightly like weird for MIT to take in someone stupid. But you're right that they go to it.
Yeah, they
It's
It's a shot at MIT.
Like
No, I'm saying they
Okay.
wouldn't take like some douchebag jock type. I wouldn't expect. I'd
And to
probably be
quote the
hopefully
vice
just-
chancellor, Declan, you didn't rehearse this, did you?
What is going on here? Like I feel like this is bizarrely hostile.
Hey,
Like,
we're all
what's going
friends
on?
here.
It's like
We're all
is
friends
it
here.
Something I said is it something?
Declan, we're all friends here.
No, we're all good.
It's all in jest. So that's right about when we get the first example of how John Watts absolutely freaking nails the Peter tingle. There's this great like almost vertigo shot where you see Peter sort of focus up, and then you see everybody running. The cars are going down through the bottom of the road, through the bridge, and then the first mechanical tentacle comes in. Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is officially in the MCU.
You know,
That-
another thing I gotta praise. I think if I didn't know that he was having de-aging done to him, I don't think I would have known. I don't think I would have been able to. I wouldn't have picked up on that at all. I think
It's done really well.
I mean,
Yeah.
it helps obviously that Alfred Molina isn't that much older than. Well, I mean, he's obviously he doesn't look that different from how he looked, but the animators did a tremendous job there. Like there was no real moment of like, oh, that looks slightly fake. Like he looked stunning, and all that. Like
Yeah.
props to them.
So what did you guys think of that first fight between Ock and Peter?
I think it was paced really well. Peter's main focus wasn't really even on Doc Ock. It was on saving the vice chancellor, and it wasn't because he wanted to get into college. It was because his values are centered around saving people and making sure that they're okay. And she was falling off of a bridge in a car, and at that moment, his only focus was to try and save her, even if it meant getting hit with, I don't know, 2-ton concrete cylinders and hit with cars and all this stuff with a guy who he's never met, calling him Peter and with metal arms. Like all of this stuff is going on, and his sole focus was trying to save this one woman. purely because that's what he thought he had to do, not for any other reason.
And the random family. But I think it was a good fight because it brought back, and this happens a lot throughout the movie, is it brought back that sense of like saving people. I guess is sort of the theme of the entire movie. That like existed in the Raimi verse. Each of the villains sort of forced him to save a lot of people, even at like body expense, mental expense. He lost a lot in order to save people. The previous two Spider-Man movies in the MCU, you somewhat get like, he's sort of just enjoying the ride of like becoming an Avenger and stuff.
Bless you.
And he has to like deal with that sort of thing of the loss and the burden of it. And I think this movie brings that out really well, which fits with all of the characters, because I think this ties more to the Raimi verse than anything else. But like both Doc Ock and all of the characters from that universe, they all represent some sort of loss to Peter, which I think was important in this movie. It fit together well, and it seems like they took those movies and built the movie themes around that so that the characters worked, which I think was the smartest thing that they could have done.
For sure.
Yeah. That really played up right in that first fight, played up what the rest of the movie was going to deal with. And Spider-Man is a character throughout his history who has had to sacrifice. And you were absolutely right, Ben. We haven't really seen that much with the MCU's Peter.
I definitely feel like this I mentioned this to you, George, before, but I felt like this one felt the most like a proper Spider-Man story. And part of that is how obviously these things are still present in the other two films, but I feel like they play up even more. The level of sacrifice that Peter's trying to make in order to help as many people as possible. Like that's a critical component of Spider-Man as a character. And I felt like this film really brought that aspect to the forefront and helped, and that improved the story itself and how it worked and how it went forward. I think that was a great thing.
Yeah, definitely 100% agree. So then Peter and Ock get their first glimpse at the Goblin. Then they are magicked away to the Sanctum. So we don't get a Goblin fight on the bridge, I think, as some people may have been expecting from the trailer. And then then May calls Peter saying, hey, wait, I might be getting ahead of myself.
No,
Then,
they get a bunch of the other people into the,
They go get, Strange already got the Lizard. Peter and Strange got Ock. Then Peter, MJ, and Ned team up to get Electro and Sandman, with Jamie Foxx coming back, butt-ass naked. And Thomas Hayden Church, Declan's favorite Spider-Man villain in any movie.
I'm an unironic defender of Spider-Man 3, in case anyone's wondering what this is all about. I mean, like, I admit it has flaws, but I love Spider-Man 3.
So then the setup to a very, very sad payoff is May calls Peter to help Norman Osborn. Yeah, that whole arc in the second act is sad because May only wants to help and Norman can't help
and
himself.
I think it's brilliant because like we just were talking about, Peter's entire arc up until this point has not been on New York. And so you don't get that sense of New Yorkers love Spider-Man that you get in both of the previous franchises before. In Spider-Man 2, I'm just going to pull out moments from there, is after the train scene when they pass him along the train and they protect him and stand up to Doc Ock. In the Andrew Garfield version of Spider-Man, you have the cranes after he injures his leg, and they sort of provide him with a path over to I think it was the Oscorp building in order to defeat the lizard. But New Yorkers love Spider-Man, and that's core to the character. And we haven't really gotten any of that up until this point in the MCU, and it went backwards towards the end of Far From Home and the very beginning of No Way Home, in which there was open hostility and hatred towards Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And I think what May's arc does for this movie and for the character going forward is it allows Peter Parker, it allows Tom Holland's Spider-Man to start to earn that love from New Yorkers. And so, you know, we have gotten confirmed a new trilogy with Tom Holland as the lead. And so I'll be looking for them to explore that and to maybe have some more classic Spider-Man films, which I think is something we can all agree we got something of that nature in this film of, you know, there's high stakes that are grounded in deep rooted love and emotion and grief and loss. And that's something that we could get going forward in the next 3 films. And it certainly seems like we're headed that way. And it's because of Aunt May's message and her sort of tone throughout this movie, and even, you know, to a certain extent, the previous 2 movies, which is doing good helps people, and when you do good, the world is good. And that's something that she always wants him to remember.
Yeah. Can I ask you guys something? This is a genuine question. When Aunt May and Norman Osborn meet in Feast, I couldn't tell. Was Norman being genuine there, or was that like a facade being put on by the Goblin persona? What did you guys think? I was
pretty convinced that it was genuinely Norman. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the beginning where he like breaks the mask. You know, he's not putting on a play for anyone else there. I think and Norman is a great, you know, villain to have.
For sure.
The arching villain. He's sort of the lead one, because the whole theme of the movie is also like Spider-Man and Peter Parker. He's living 2 lives, and he can't, which is very similar to Norman. You know, he's inadvertently living 2 lives, and he can't control it. And so it's a nice foil for, you know, Peter Parker and Spider-Man, or he wants to help, you know, Norman, just like he wants to, you know, help people that he's friends with, you know, as Peter Parker. He's very much a human and hero, which is why, you know, he doesn't want to send all these people to their deaths and stuff. But I think Norman is a very sympathetic villain because those moments are genuine, I think. And then he snaps and, you know, the Green Goblin comes out, but it's like, it's almost a different person. It's literally almost, you know, 2 different people, 2 different lives.
I like your point, Declan. There's a lot of subtlety in this performance. I was talking to George about this after we had both seen it for the first time. And I personally think that Willem Dafoe's performance as Norman Osborn Green Goblin was better than his performance in the first Spider-Man. I loved the facial expressions. I loved, like I said, the subtlety that it was tough to tell who he was in each passing moment. And I agree with you that when he was in Feast, there sort of things that he did with his mouth and tonation of his voice was a little bit off. And I think that is obviously part of the character, but it's to remind us that there's a little bit of darkness inside of everybody, especially Norman Osborn.
I think he actually, if I remember this correctly, he actually wore like a prosthetic when he was supposed to be playing the Green Goblin. When Norman, he took it out. So his like voice literally and his mouth probably do look different.
I think
look at that more.
I think it was the other way around, Ben. I think he wore the prosthetic to have normal teeth for Norman, and then when he took it out, he would have his regular teeth for the Goblin, which it's a fun fact behind the scenes. So
did his own stunts too at the age of 66.
What?
Yeah.
For this movie, he did his own stunts.
Yeah.
What?
That was one of his requirements to come onto the film, was that he do his own stunts.
I didn't know.
Or as many as he could, but
Yeah.
you know,
he
he didn't want to
didn't-
just be like a voice actor or have a stunt double for simpler
Oh.
things. Yeah.
So moving on, the next sort of sequence takes us back to the Sanctum. All the villains realize that they're gonna die in their universes, or most of them realize that they're gonna die in their universes. Obviously, Sandman doesn't. But the rest of Lizard is like, we're gonna die or we're gonna go with you.
Yeah.
So
Lizard was a weird presence.
yeah.
He was a
So
little odd.
Peter and Strange duke it out over the spell to send them home, the magic box. They go to the mirror dimension. The visuals are spectacular. Peter uses his tingle to keep the box away from Strange, even in his astral form. That sequence was just amazing.
Yeah.
It was one of the best parts of the movie for me.
Peter uses math to get out of the mirror dimension.
Yeah. It was
Oh.
clever. It was clever. Though, like,
You know
the one-
geometry.
The one thing was like, wait, are you like, aren't you worried he's gonna die or something like that? But I mean, I get no. The webbing does eventually break after 6 hours. So yeah, no.
Like, you left him in the mirror dimension. Like, with
That is sling ring.
Yeah.
Literally no way home for him.
That's where they got the name of the movie, No Way Home for Strange.
Oh my god.
So then after Peter leaves Strange in the mirror dimension, it's like, here, Ned, take the sling ring. That'll come in handy later. And then
he took away his ring. Maybe that's what he needs to get home. Again, not it isn't, but it's like, again, just something I thought a little bit about when I was watching. I was like,
yeah.
do they know that Doctor Strange is going to be okay when they leave him there? But
So Peter and May and all the villains, right? Except for Kurt Connors, go to Happy's condo, and they start working on cures. They cure Doc Ock. Dr. Otto Octavius has, sorry, that's not his real name. Just the joke from the movie is, what's your real name? So Ock is cured. Otto gets his mind back. He gets his control back. And then the Goblin breaks free of Norman, and Electro and Sandman escape. Lizard escapes. We'll see the three of them together later on. But then the Goblin and Peter fight. It's pretty ruthless, but not nearly as ruthless as the fight that they have at the end of the film. And then May gets involved. What do you guys think of the aforementioned apartment scene?
I had actually heard that that this was going to happen, like,
that's too bad.
months before. I kind of expected someone to die.
I did too.
Surprised. It really seemed like it was that type of movie, especially because, Spider-Man. Yeah, I guess he loses Tony. That's his like father figure. He doesn't have an Uncle Ben, and I think Aunt May kind of is the substitute. And really, in this movie, she does the things Uncle Ben does, and really connects all the Spider-Man at the end, where they're all like, "Oh yeah, that's what Uncle Ben said."
The one thing that brought down her death scene, which was so good, so well executed and well acted, was, and this is a purely like personal thing, it's not actually the film's fault. It was in that moment that I realized, like, oh shit, Uncle Ben is never going to be important in the MCU. MCU Spider-Man has never been motivated and never will be motivated by anything to do with Uncle Ben. And that, as a Spider-Man fan, I was a little bit like once it got later into the film, I got it. But in that moment, I was a little bit like, just a little bit like taken aback by that they would change such a integral part of the character. Again, as the film goes on, it makes more sense, and I still get it. And it still absolutely worked. I imagine this flaw, if you can call it that, will dissipate with time. But in the moment of my first seeing it, it felt like a bit of a it hurt slightly.
But then the Uncle Ben-ness of it is paid off a couple scenes later, right after the biggest one of the biggest fan service moments of the movie. One of my favorite scenes, and I know it's probably up there with the rest of you.
When Norman Osborn said, "I'm something of a scientist."
Yeah, I was right to say. No, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Well done. Well done.
Perfect comedic timing, Declan. Well done. Ned and MJ are hanging out. They're like, MJ wants to press the button to send all the villains back. And then Ned's like, I just wish I could find Peter Parker. And he's using the sling ring, which he's never really used before. And then suddenly we get a different Peter Parker. And then we get a different Peter Parker. The reveal of Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker was done so well. You see him in that alleyway. He runs forward. He's in the suit. He pulls the mask off. It's executed so well. And then to turn around and have Tobey come out as Peter, not as Spider-Man, which I feel might have been a reference to the fan ideas that Andrew's the best Spider-Man, Tobey's the best Peter Parker.
Oh, I wonder.
Maybe.
That's interesting.
Maybe it was just to have them.
I was just thinking that they were in different stages of their lives as Peter
Yeah.
Parker. That Tobey is kind of the elder statesman, kind of like, not quite like Into the Spider-Verse, where we have Jake Johnson being the older, but there's definitely, and then Andrew Garfield's still kind of active in his role as Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire somewhat, maybe not quite as much, but then also having like the first one be a reveal is really cool, but then having two guys like take off their mask might have been overdoing it a bit, but seeing just like the full body of Tobey Maguire coming out of a circle and spinning in Ned's grandmother's apartment or house or whatever, like, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
How cool was that?
In the theater, like I greatly enjoyed when this happened. When like Andrew Garfield stepped out, there was like it was a massive applause, happened. And then when Tobey stepped out, there was an even higher amount of applause in the theater, which I love. I couldn't help but love that. It was.
I tweeted something a few months ago that really rung true for this, and especially for that moment. And one moment later on, when all three Spider-Men are talking about their villains, which we'll get to in a minute. But I tweeted something like, you can't bring back Tobey and Andrew's villains without bringing back Tobey and Andrew. And I felt validated by their appearance in the film. Like I went in pretty confident that they would appear, but then when they showed up, it was ecstasy. It was fantastic.
If there was some way to know they wouldn't show up, that would have been fantastic. But I think everyone a little bit knew that it was gonna happen.
It was pretty obvious.
But it was still so good.
But it was nice to see it fully realized. I will make the point just about Tobey. He's in his clothes and stuff. He's really like the optimist of the group, Andrew's like a little run down. He's like, well, I don't pull my punches anymore. It was in a dark place. Tom Spider-Man is in a dark place. Tobey, I think, he's supposed to be like a little bit older and have that wisdom. It's like, well, I've been through some shitty scenarios. I've got this complicated relationship with MJ, but we make it work.
And that scene, that next scene on the rooftop where Tobey and Andrew are finally face to face with Tom.
Mhm.
It was a touching moment to see them sort of, Tom's Peter says, don't tell me you know what I'm going through, but they do. They've experienced loss in many different situations. Toby's lost, he's lost Harry, he's lost Uncle Ben. He's lost Norman and Otto in his universe before that
Yeah, quite
happened.
honestly, Toby probably knows a lot better what Tom is going through than he does.
Yeah.
Because he lost a lot more.
Mhm. I would honestly say that like my favorite part of the movie is just the scenes of all the Spider-Men shooting the shit together, and just like kind
Mine
of
too.
talking about their various experiences. Like
Which
the best
one?
part, especially
All of them, Ben.
and I like that
all of them.
it wasn't like dismissive, but I just love how it's like wait, you can just do it out of your wrist?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to build it? How? I love that. That was so
I was hoping that they would cover that since I was pretty confident they were going to be in the movie.
Yeah. No, it's like I think I saw somewhere someone said, and I totally agree. They weren't like just cameos or anything. Like Peter Parker as Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker, and Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker were both their characters and had their own mini character journey.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because there's not a new villain in this movie. The entire cast of villains is from all these old movies. So you really, to George's point, you really can't do a movie bringing all those villains and not have the other Spider-Mans, because there's a lot more personal like value to each one of them, to each of the respective Spider-Mans. And Tom's trying to save them all, but there's a lot of different battles here, and even like Andrew's battles, like losing Gwen, that's shown in the movie, where he catches MJ this time when Tom is like hit by the Goblin. But yeah, I mean, I loved how they played off each other too, like especially
on the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, especially on the Statue of Liberty.
They recreated the Spider-Man pointing meme twice.
Yeah, they did
in the film.
Wait, they recreate? Oh my gosh, I didn't even notice.
It was very subtle. It was pretty
the
subtle. Yeah.
in the lab at Midtown School of Science and Technology, Ned says Peter, and they're like, yeah, and then they start pointing at each other, like which one of us did you mean? Peter Parker, who is Spider-Man. Ned was fantastic in this movie. But then on the statue, which the climax of the film happens at the Statue of Liberty with the big Captain America shield, which they tease at the beginning of the movie. There's a news report going on, and they're like, "You're gonna put the Captain America shield on the Statue of Liberty?" But then after they start to lure the other universe villains to the Statue of Liberty for an isolated fight, they can't really get their shit together as a team, as a unit. So then they huddle up and they're like, I thought I was Peter 1, you're Peter 2. And then Andrew's like, oh, Peter 3. And at that point, they're all pointing at each other too. So that plays out.
That was the more direct one, I think.
Because they're in a triangle.
Yeah.
They're right there.
There's no question. No film will ever top Into the Spider-Verse's reference to the Spider-Man pointing at each other meme.
And the post-credit scene with Spider-Man 2099.
Like it's just that one is like the great the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I will go here on the record, is the greatest reference to a meme that a film has ever done. Like, all other references by the nature of memes are very difficult to pull off. Even this one with its fantastic, though slightly silly, I'm something of a scientist myself. It was a bit like forced it a little bit, but in that one, that was perfect for its reference. But the other reference, which I'm pretty sure was a reference that I enjoyed, was having Tobey Maguire just randomly talk about his back troubles and all that, which I'm pretty sure is a joke on the fact that in Spider-Man 2, while shooting it, he apparently had a back injury, and there was a serious chance that Jake Gyllenhaal would have replaced him in the role of
Mysterio.
Well, it's because that was when he lost. That was when he had the web block, and had the existential crisis that they were talking about. And he was trying to get it back, and he like almost did, and was trying to climb up the wall, trying to jump over buildings and everything, but then ended up falling and hit his back. And the whole thing is, oh, my back.
Yeah.
Oh, ow, my back.
gosh,
Because
I
he had
didn't- I
just
didn't
been
know
yelling,
maybe-
I'm back, because he was like excited. And then he ended up falling and saying, oh, my back. So it's like lots of levels there.
Ooh, oh my gosh. So,
Yeah.
oh wow, they built on something subtle.
Yeah.
So
It's actually funny because I didn't know that happened to Tobey Maguire until Jake Gyllenhaal was Mysterio, and people talked about like, oh, this is actually sort of a interesting full circle for Jake Gyllenhaal given his history. It's all that. So it shows a level of care that they put into it.
So all encompassing as a whole, this climax where they're fighting 5 villains, they're trying to cure them all. Or sorry, they're fighting 4 villains because Ock is already cured. And that's a great moment when Ock shows up and he turns on Electro. But the 3 Spider-Men are working together. They have that great swinging set when they all figure out what they're doing, and they're all working together, they're all swinging off of each other. And then, they all land in their classic poses, which was the best moment of fan service in the entire movie. It all encompassing until the Goblin leaves the pumpkin bomb in the magic box and Strange's spell explodes out over everywhere. I think it felt very much like a Spider-Man movie in terms of how, previous Spider-Man movies, both in the MCU and outside the MCU, where we see these villains. Like there was a very Spider-Man-esque dynamic between the villains and the heroes. And then, of course, it's an MCU movie, so it also felt a lot like the Avengers movies, the big team-up movies, where it's this big scale battle, and you see how the heroes are working together. You see how the villains are playing into the sort of adversarial role. So I think the direction and the execution of the climax leading up to Peter 1 and the Goblins fight on the overturned shield was just fantastic. I've used fantastic too much in this episode. It was phenomenally done. So what do you guys think of the climax to the point when Peter and the Goblin start fighting?
Okay, to the point of that.
We'll get to the one-on-one fight in a second.
There you go. Okay, yeah. It was cool that they were talking about coordination, and I don't know, it worked kind of. I feel like it was creative how it's like they were like, oh, we have to think about this and put all of our focus on one rather than all split off to 3. Like again, it wasn't just another fight, sort of. It was a real like thought process went into the crafting of this scene, which I thought was good.
I don't want to brag, but I was in the Avengers. The Avengers, that's great. What is that?
There's a part of me that I wish this would have never happened. It is if somehow Tobey Maguire's character could have said something like, the Avengers, is that like the Justice League or something like that? Because Superman is referenced once in the universe.
Anyways, moving on.
All right.
There's that part of me that's like, that would have been. It would have been like, I don't even know. That would have been amazing.
So much fan service. I love it.
I liked the closure that the Statue of Liberty scene gave 2 of the Spider-Men. The most obvious, I think, was with
Flint Marko.
Andrew Garfield, and being able to finally sort of close that circle of catching someone falling off of a building, because he obviously lost Gwen. It was heartbreaking. And then the moment when he finally catches MJ and breaks down in tears. I thought that was an incredible moment. I loved it. And then for Tobey Maguire, his Spider-Man, I think also got some closure, because Norman Osborn was his was a personal villain for him. Acted a little bit like a father figure in the first movie, and then ends up dying because of the glider. And yet he instead develops a cure to cure Norman Osborn of the Green Goblin sort of serum or whatever, instead of him dying. And I think that was closure that he got, because one line he said in the Midtown Science Lab was, "I've been thinking about this one for a long time." And so he finally was able to save the villain that died the most directly at his hand. I thought that was fantastic.
And also,
Stealing
It
your word,
was,
George.
it was sweet, yeah.
he also, played a large part in like turning Harry into the Hobgoblin too. So, it's like a double whammy for him.
Yeah, it just goes back to that conversation we were having about all the loss that especially Tobey's Peter has had over the course of his 3 movies and now No Way Home.
Mhm.
So obviously the quintessential moment of the film, other than the 3 of them posing together, was the darkest we have ever seen Tom Holland's Peter Parker. Just going after the Green Goblin on that overturned Captain America shield. I think Tom Holland and Willem Dafoe gave a great performance in that fight. The physicality of it was more than what we got between Tom and the Vulture, between Tom and Mysterio. Certainly more than what we got between Tobey and the Goblin in the first Spider-Man film. Very physical, very brutal. It was dark. And, you see Tobey and Andrew's reactions to it. You see Ned and MJ's reactions to it.
And it was on Captain America's shield too. And this is on the heels of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where, not to hit it too much on the nose, but the shield gets turned upside down for a couple of episodes. It gets turned into something that Steve Rogers would not stand for.
Yeah.
It's not something he would do. And it's being done on the stage of essentially his legacy, Steve Rogers' legacy.
And that's why when Tobey steps in between Peter 1 and the Goblin to save the Goblin's life, it sort of speaks to the whole "that's not why we're here" element of the scene. Tom's Peter had said a couple of times, "I want to kill him," or I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you myself. Talking about the Goblin, and he wants to. He wants to avenge. He's an Avenger. He wants to avenge May's death, and I think Tobey stepping in between reaffirms to Tom's Peter that May didn't die so that Peter could kill his enemies. May died because she was trying to help people, and Tobey's Peter wanted to just reaffirm that message for Tom's Peter that, he's on the rooftop, killing the Goblin won't bring May back. It won't make you feel better. I should know because I hunted down the guy I thought killed Ben. So the whole Tobey, Tom, Willem dynamic in that moment, right before Tobey's Peter gets stabbed, was just so well acted and so well conceived by the creative team to have that be this defining moment in the movie.
Yeah, and I think I mean, largely it like reflects a lot. I'm gonna go back to like, this is a movie about loss and sacrifice, and really, you know, that darkness that comes out of him. We've seen it before, you know, in other Spider-Man movies, but also like in other Marvel heroes, you know, even like Thor and Iron Man, like almost all of them have had their dark spots, other than maybe Captain America. He's pretty
Long live Steve Rogers.
yeah. But you know, it reflects like with Tony Stark. You know, Tony Stark was always trying to teach him like how much you're putting on the line when you put on that suit. And you know, Tom Holland's Peter Parker really never got it, you know. Like, yeah, he lost Tony, but Tony sort of sacrificed himself. You know, there was no, couldn't like take vengeance on Thanos. Thanos was gone because of what Tony did.
It wasn't his choices or anything.
Yeah, and there was no one that, you know, you could take vengeance on. You know, he was just gone. I feel like this is the first time Peter Parker's actually lost someone, you know, that he can take vengeance on, and he has that power. And before, he was only using it for good. But he really, until this movie, I feel like he really didn't understand exactly what Tony was trying to get at. All the times where he was trying to, you know, keep him safe and, you know, trying to like monitor him and protect him. It's for him, it's for, you know, those moments where like Tony Stark had the Iron Man 2, and it's actually kind of reflected because I think that's the arc reactor that Electro stole. It's the one he made in Iron Man 2, where it's just, is it Iron Man 2 where he makes the new elephant, right?
Yeah.
Where he was like falling apart and dying, and you know, just
He was being poisoned. Yeah.
And also, like, he wanted vengeance on the Winter Soldier because he killed his parents. So he's like, I feel like a lot of the Avengers have dealt with that, and this is the first time Spider-Man has really seen that.
You know, one thing I also just got to bring up quickly. I have never been more glad for the MCU's reluctant to kill its heroes than when Tobey Maguire got stabbed there. Like, I was like, oh my god, are they killing it? Like, it was almost like, oh no, it makes too much sense, you know.
I thought Toby would die in the movie.
What? Yeah. No, it's like, oh man, maybe that's why Tobey Maguire agreed to come back, is so the character will be killed and so he doesn't have to do it anymore. Like, I don't know. For some reason, it was like, but then when he was like, I mean, he was obviously in great pain, but like still stood up. It was fine. I was like, you know, and all.
I've been stabbed before.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like, once they said that, it actually did make sense for sure. But it's like, but it was still like, I was as well worried he was going to die.
I think it would have been a little cheap to do that.
For sure. For like, absolutely.
Yeah. So then Peter makes the big decision that he couldn't make early in the film, and he asks Doctor Strange to erase everyone in the multiverse's memory of Peter Parker. And I think that, you know, Peter can lose as many people. He's lost Tony, he's lost May. In What If, he mentions that he had an Uncle Ben at some point. So
there's like a Ben Parker initial on a suitcase or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that.
So we know Peter has dealt with loss, but this is the biggest sacrifice he makes, because as Strange tells him, and Max, you were talking about this before, but everyone who knows and loves you, we won't be able to remember you. And I think Peter making the decision, Homecoming was very much about him wanting to take that next step. And Far From Home was about wanting to stay sort of a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and almost being reluctant to take the step. No Way Home, he takes the step and he does what has to be done for the greater good rather than putting his own self-interest above the, as I said, the greater good, which I think is something that Tony Stark knew when he took the Infinity Stones from Thanos at the Battle of Earth. And I think that's something that Tom realized maybe as Strange was dealing with his catastrophic spell maybe as he was fighting all the other villains and seeing how much his mistake had meant to the multiverse. But he made the decision that he had to give up his identity for the greater good. And I think scripting that into this story not only sets up so many new possibilities for the next 3 films, but also shows that this is kind of the end of this Peter Parker's origin story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys get what I mean?
Yeah. I will say on a similar note to that, the final moment of fan service is, even though they never showed it, having Tom Holland Spider-Man wear a like proper Spider-Man costume after
Comic accurate.
Very, yeah, like exactly accurate, rather than like the almost one. Obviously, we didn't get a good enough look at it that I can't definitively say it's better than Andrew Garfield's costume in Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I would say is the best. It's still so far the best on-screen Spider-Man costume, but it's like even just a brief look at it, to have a comic accurate Tom Holland Spider-Man suit, that's pretty damn awesome in my opinion. And as you said, it's what you're talking about him fully becoming this character, kind of. That's damn exciting, and it does make me intrigued for where it will go in the future. And yeah, how great it was.
I think the sacrifice he makes also like ties back to the beginning where Doctor Strange is like, the problem is you're trying to live 2 lives, and then makes the choice to only live 1 life. So now he's just Spider-Man pretty much. Peter Parker doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I like that they have him,
apartment.
yeah, I like that they have him like studying the GED. I don't know how he afforded that apartment. Maybe he got the room and then he has to make some money. But like he really doesn't exist.
It's a time.
Money from Aunt May.
Yeah, I'm sure May had money that was left to her estate.
His parents probably left him money in their estate. Ben
Again,
left money.
but then how
Peter
does he get it if Peter doesn't exist? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, apparently Aunt May, like Happy has no clue. No one has any
Yeah, but,
idea
like,
these questions
it
do not
was-
exist.
It was
He
like
didn't
a like,
graduate high
wait,
school.
like it is sort of like, it was like, why didn't Happy have a moment of like, wait, how do I know Spider-Man
Yeah, how do I
and
know?
Aunt May? How
I
is Aunt May
wonder if they'll
connected?
bring that up again. It's like, even if MJ is like, oh yeah, I'm dating Spider-Man. Oh, who is he?
Yeah.
no,
It's a little bit.
Spider-Man. I don't know who this Peter Parker guy is.
I think the fact that they left a lot of that ending ambiguous, they don't have to answer all the questions that we have. One, they've got 3 more movies to talk about where Spider-Man goes next, but also this ending, I say this a lot about La La Land, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's perfectly imperfect. I don't think Peter needs to have a happy ending where, oh, MJ and Ned and Happy are the only ones, and Strange are the only ones who remember him. He doesn't need that to happen because that's not what's necessary for the character. So I think leaving some of the questions that we have unanswered presents a new opportunity for us, the audience, to see Peter Parker on screen in Spider-Man 4 that we've never seen before.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting template, and this would be like a bad way to end the character.
Yeah.
This is fine for like, since as you said, this trilogy sort of completes his origin. He really learns the true lessons of Spider-Man in this movie, whereas he's still a youthful kid in the others, and he's really naive. Even during huge battles with Thanos, he still doesn't quite get it because he never has lost anyone close to him. I mean, he blipped out, so he doesn't even know that. He just came back and like, oh hey.
Yeah. So then he swings past Rockefeller Center, and we don't know if that's going to tie into Hawkeye episode 6. We're recording this on Monday, December 20th. We're releasing it Tuesday, December 21st. Hawkeye finishes with episode 6 on Wednesday, December 22nd. So we don't know if it's going to tie in, but we know that Hawkeye will end up at Rockefeller Plaza in the final episode. So maybe he swings by there in the last scene. Maybe
I
Peter
feel like
Parker
it
will
would-
cameo, or
That
Spider-Man will
would be a
cameo.
weird timeline if you think about it, because there's all this stuff going
I
on.
checked. They happen at Christmas time 2024. They both do.
Okay, interesting.
See, that's weird to me.
It's weird, but it can happen is all I'm
Yeah, but you
saying.
think in Hawkeye, like all the TVs would be like, all right, the multiverse is crumbling around us. Weird men with
Yeah.
mechanical
Ben.
arms.
I just want it to happen, okay?
I'm just trying to think about this. New York's not that big.
So that wraps up the meat of the movie. We get the mid-credit scene. Tom Hardy, who is just completely underserved by relegating him to a mid-credit scene.
He's
Almost
the sixth
like-
of the Sinister Six. Like,
Almost
he's
like
relegated post credits.
bringing him to the MCU was just a punchline to the punchline of Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
It was a post credit scene that took a minute, and then a post credit scene.
I-
He's
if-
never there.
If I had no idea about the Let There Be no, honestly, if I didn't know, no, actually, straight up, if I didn't know you guys, I would have. Or
You don't
anyone
exist.
doing this podcast, I would. True. I would have no reason to have looked up what the post-credit scene of Let There Be Carnage would be, and thus I would be so confused by his appearance in this film. I'll be like, wait, what the fuck? Wait, Tom Hart? What? Wait, I would have been so confusing to me, you know.
So he
did drop
leaves.
that too, though.
He left a little bit of the symbiote, which I don't know how that stays while the rest of him goes, but I guess that'll be explained in Spider-Man 4, 5, or
Or
6.
not? Who cares?
Yeah. It could very well just be a punchline.
Hmm.
I don't know if they'd leave that unresolved, but could be. And
That
then
bartender becomes the new Venom.
in my second viewing of the film, I was at an IMAX theater for this movie. I was as close to dead center in the theater as I could, and of course I had already seen it, but this guy basically shouted at the entire IMAX auditorium, "I've seen it before, don't go anywhere," after the mid-credit scene. And that guy was me.
Are you
Oh
kidding
my
me?
god, George.
Oh my god.
And
Go ahead. Oh my
I am
God.
so proud of myself for that moment, because literally half the auditorium left before the mid-credit scene even happened. So,
Rookies. That's rookie. That's a rookie.
the
move
MCU's
right
been around
there.
for 13 years. You'd think people would stick around as long as the credits go on.
Hmm.
But then we are left with the most maddening tease since the teaser for the Avengers after Captain America, the first Avenger.
Oh my gosh. That's
And that is, we're running a little long here, but I think it's okay on this episode. The teaser for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. We got a lot to talk about with that one. Obviously, we're going to talk about the movie when it comes out in the spring, but the multiverse isn't finished with Doctor Strange yet, even though he tried to close it up at the end of No Way Home.
It has been pointed out, of course, and that Multiverse of Madness, you take the first letter of each of those words,
Mhm.
and then you put them right in front of you, and then you flip it around. That says "Wow," which is Owen Wilson's catchphrase, and Owen Wilson was in Loki. So it's like maybe there's a crossover there. that
Okay,
will happen.
but hear me out. Multiverse of Madness. If we just take the first letters, it says mom, right? Wanda, mom. Okay. And
Yeah,
these kids
exactly.
that she's trying to chase down. Okay.
It's gonna be revealed in Multiverse of Madness that Wanda is actually Owen Wilson's mother.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she's for the TVA.
Uh,
Yes.
but in
Kevin
all
Feige's sweating
seriousness,
right now.
as
There's a
Martin
dope
Starr
teaser.
as Martin Starr's character said in one of the earlier scenes, in his only scene of the movie, they're conspiracy theorists. Look at these two. It's gonna tie into WandaVision. It's gonna tie into Loki. No shit, we know it's gonna tie into those films, into those series.
They are confirmed. I believe Loki is confirmed.
I
Yeah,
also want
It
to
just
stress,
makes sense. You
stress
know, all of
for-
it is dealing with the multiverse.
Yeah.
You know, it's dealing with Wanda. I'd be surprised if they didn't.
I have to make
So,
the point that like the multiverse of madness, a lot of people have been trying to figure out what the main thing is. I don't think it's a main thing. I mean, we've had like a lot happen where the multiverse seems like it's going a little haywire. I think just all of them are probably adding up to the madness. So I would imagine all of
Shumagorath.
and Shumagorath, yeah. Maybe he's planting seeds in Doctor Strange's head. That's why I decided to do this stupid spell anyway.
it
Yeah,
actually
so
was Mephisto the entire time.
the second viewing was so much more fun knowing that Strange wasn't Mephisto. I enjoyed his characterization a lot more. So before we wrap this one up, we talked about it before we started recording. Something that we did a little bit with the Eternals episode we did. It's how would you like to see, or who would you like to see the other multiverse villains of Spider-Man? Who would you like to see them interact with pre-existing in the MCU? And I'm going to go in and make a new rule here before we start. You can't say Spider-Man or anyone they interacted with in this movie.
Okay.
So Max, you had a pretty good one. Why don't you start us off?
Okay, yeah. I had Woody Harrelson's Carnage from Let There Be Carnage interacting with Andrew Garfield. I just think it would be kind of fun for him to finally get his, I don't know, alien fix, symbiote fix that he missed out on between.
I want to fight an alien.
Yeah, he wants to fight an alien. Let the guy fight an alien and let it be Woody Harrelson. I think they'd have some great banter back and forth. Because obviously Cletus Cassidy's a crazy guy, and Andrew Garfield is so funny as Peter Parker or Spider-Man. So I think they'd be great together. Even in a one-on-one fight, it'd be a lot of fun.
Ben, you got one?
I do. Norman Osborn and Bruce Banner,
Ooh.
Oh,
Oh, that's good.
who has, obviously both enhanced themselves. Both have side effects. They didn't just get strength. But I think it would be an interesting one. They're both battling demons. One's more of a hero, one's obviously more a villain. But they're, it's a sympathetic villain, and they both have their internal battles, which would be interesting to see. And plus, they're both scientists. It's a lot of fun.
well, speaking of both scientists, Dr. Otto Octavius and Tony Stark. I think the invention of their own tech, you see Doc Ock with the nanotech impacting his tentacles in that bridge scene, but I think putting Alfred Molina's Doc Ock either opposite, working aside or on the side of Tony Stark, or as an antagonist, I think that would be a really fun dynamic to see the two of them.
Also, like on a similar point, I think it would be really another on a similar pairing. I think it would be really fun to have Alfred Molina meet Ant-Man and friend of the podcast Michael Douglas as Hank Pym. I think both of the brilliant scientists of a different stripe, and didn't go mad. Plus, of course, we keep our friends in work and all that, so that's the other reason why they should meet, all that. Make sure Michael Douglas, our friend, keeps getting his appearance.
That's to Michael Douglas.
Hey, wait, can I say one more? Because I
Yeah.
said a Spider-Man and you said not to do that, but I had that one before you had said no Spider-Man. So I'll follow the rules this time. Paul Giamatti's Rhino and Aquafina.
Ooh. I love it.
I just
Where
think
did
it'd be
you come up with
chaotic,
that?
and I just think it'd be really funny.
Yeah.
I don't think anything important should happen. I just think it would be really funny.
Yes. Yes. Without a doubt.
I'm gonna break my own rule here with another one, and actually do a Spider-Man and talk about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I want to see Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Luis from Ant-Man.
Anybody with Luis, man.
Anybody with Luis would be great. I mean, you could
Luis
put
needs to be in more MCU stuff.
you
Just
could
in
put
general.
like Electro opposite Luis and it would work because Michael Pena is so funny and Jamie Foxx is one of the brightest spots of this movie.
Yeah. They completely redid his character, but in a great way, for sure.
You guys aren't going to say anything about the fact that I'm butt-ass naked?
All right, Ben and Declan both get one with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta, of course, bring up the fact that, like, well, okay, one quick one with Spider-Man, but then another one without Spider-Man. I think I would, of course, also like to see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man meeting with, I don't even know, just like literally anyone, because I want to see more Tobey Spider-Mans. It's, you know, so great.
Like one of
And
the
of course,
Eternals.
yeah, it's like the Eternals, like like Tobey Spider-Man, yeah, Eternals or something like that. I don't even know. And of course, the other one that should happen is Dr. Michael Mobius, played by Jared Leto, should meet Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture. I think that would be a really great pairing, and that should be done. Those two characters, but like the best character. No, I love Michael.
Someone call Sony. I've got a movie idea.
We're gonna have to figure out what universe that's in because
It's in all. There's so much going on in that trailer. Yeah, there's so much going on.
No, the Mobius movie. This is the most. You are scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of characters you have access to and are given a movie.
Hey, all right, Morbius is good, and stop calling him Mobius. This isn't the major.
It's a Morbius. Okay, this
This
shows
isn't
how much
Loki. This
I
isn't Owen Wilson. He's not
genuinely
Agent
Wow.
Mobius.
for fans of the character, because that was disgraceful. The only place I know him from is from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, which I enjoyed, but like he was just some guy in a couple episodes of that.
No, he's got a pretty good comic line. He's actually a good character.
Oh yeah.
Ben, why don't you give your last matchup and then we'll take it home for the night.
And my last matchup, I mean, it's got to be Andrew Garfield and the Big Wheel. That's what I really want in the MCU.
All right.
All
That's
right.
that's gonna do it. I don't want any explanation on that. You've talked about it enough in the group chat. That's gonna do it for this episode of Unqualified Film Bros. We loved the movie. Go see Spider-Man No Way Home while it's still in theaters. We're all gonna see it.
Go see West Side Story in theaters, everyone. God damn it. Sorry, I had to bring that
all right,
up.
Declan, all right.
The worst part about Spider-Man No Way Home is how all it's taking up so much of the box office that like all the other movies
It's
are
even taking up most of New York.
Anyway, sorry.
Yo, what if West Side Story happens at the same time in New York and that's gonna do it for this episode. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Night.